You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. And today I have joining me Brandon Odoi from footballhotbed.com. Of course, Football Hotbed, a legendary website down here in South Florida. Brandon Odoi, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, my pleasure, brother.
Well, it's been crazy Portapalooza, man, in the past couple of days for the University of Miami football team. I mean, many knew that there were several players that Miami was interested in to visit over the weekend, and Miami went 4 for 4, man. Like 4 for 4, like the Wendy's 4 for 4, you know? I mean, I haven't got that in a minute, but Miami, for them to go 4 for 4, I mean, there was only one other player that didn't commit, but, you know, we're still out on that last player as well. They could go 5 for 5, but still 2 days, 4 commits. Brandon, I mean, unbelievable haul by this staff, by this program, to get a running back like Damian Martinez, who's an instant starter, instant offense for you. Pair him with the Cam Ward. And then you got some defensive guys as well for depth purposes in a Jaden Alderman and a De'Ani Hill. And then you got another playmaker at wide receiver, which you really really needed as far as a bigger receiver, because Miami's got a ton of slot guys that can play, but only a couple of really bigger receivers now with the addition of Sam Brown. Just your overall opinion, Brandon, on their haul this weekend, and, you know, what should we expect from the Miami Hurricanes with these transfers?
Well, I think it was a good haul. Anytime you prioritize guys and you bring them in on campus on official visits and they commit to you, that's exactly what you want to happen. A lot of people don't understand how expensive and how intensive these official visit weekends can be. You literally have coaches that are, you know, spending their Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and you know, afternoons and evenings. And this involves not only them, but a lot of times their entire families. You're talking about wives. You're talking about making plans with babysitters, children. I mean, they're really dedicating these times to their recruits and their families. And so in order to sort of, you know, put, you know, sort of the clamps around these kids, you know, and I don't know how involved and intensive it gets with, you know, the recruits out of the portal, but certainly with high school recruits, you know, when they go to dinner, they go as wives and they go as families. So it's labor intensive stuff. So anytime you get the amount of guys that you bring in, it's a win. It doesn't necessarily matter how good they are. Anytime you as a team prioritize guys and they commit to you, you know, that's money and time well spent. So now, because you got to think about it, you're flying guys in, you're taking care of them, putting them up in the hotels. They stay in, you know, really glamorous hotels down in the Coral Gables area. You're feeding them, because on official visits, you can do so much by NCAA rules. So, you know, your car service, you got a lot of stuff going on from a financial piece. And I'm not talking about NIL. So going 4 for 4 like the Hurricanes did, and I'm glad you mentioned the young man that did not commit. I believe it's a Tennessee defensive end. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not as locked in on this stuff as you are. You are absolutely the authority, and shout out to you and everybody at Canes County for the work that they do. But that young man is intriguing to me because he provides more of the depth that you're looking for, but more so he gives you that veteran presence. Miami has a lot of young talent at the defensive end position. Armando Blunt, you know, you have the young man coming, Lightfoot from Chicago. When you lose Wayne, you lose a Najee Kelly. Those guys, while young, still had, you know, some games under their belt. So you bringing in a bunch of freshmen. Yeah, they're very talented, but outside of Ruben Bain, you don't have a lot of guys with a lot of snaps. So it's good to bring in a guy who has a little bit of a veteran presence at that position. So he, to me, the guys from Michigan State, those D tackles. Those are the guys to me that I'm very curious about to see. But to bring in a Damian Martinez from Oregon State, the way he ran the football, to bring in this young man at the DB position. And, you know, you look at Martinez, the way that he kind of gets those yards after the carry, the yak, to me is what makes him special, because I think he has home run hitting ability. And that's the thing that I liked and I think you miss about a Henry Parrish. Parrish had the ability, you know, to hit it and get missing. And with Mark Fletcher coming back off of injury, who else on this roster outside of, you know, Chris Johnson, who has not played a lot and has not been prioritized in this offense, who has the ability to get to the end zone? And so even while Fletcher, I felt, got faster last year, we don't know how he's going to respond coming back off of injury. So really getting Damian Martinez is a safety valve for the University of Miami. He's a guy who's ran for a lot of yards. He's a veteran presence in the locker room, and he seems to already want to play, you know, with Cam Ward. And I think that that's what this weekend was about, Marcus. Guys that want to play with good players. Good players want to play with good players. You see it all the time in 7-on-7. Guys are playing for South Florida Express, Raw Miami, whatever the case may be. They pick up other guys. Talent begets talent, because guys want to be in winning programs around winning atmospheres, and they want to go to the pros, and they want to look good doing it. And so I think what happened this weekend down at Coral Gables is a solid, and his coaching staff, it does do one thing, and it raises expectations. The amount of wins that you are expected to come home with just went up. And as long as you're comfortable with that, you know, Mario Cristobal, Shannon Dawson, Lance Guidry, as long as you're comfortable with that, then what happened this weekend is absolutely fine. And I think they have to be comfortable with that, because they came here to win. They didn't come here to just be another coaching staff and we'll coach until we're done and then we're out of here. They really want to bring championships back to the University of Miami. Much easier said than done, but you have to like what took place on this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Miami couldn't have done any better with what happened this weekend. And Tyler Barron is the player that you're referring to from Tennessee, the edge that was the only one to leave the weekend without committing. But from what I hear, Miami still feels confident there. But there are some other players that will be visiting this week, one of which you mentioned, Simeon Barrow, and also his teammate over there at Michigan State, Derek Harmon. So those are two guys that will be visiting this week to add some more depth to the defensive line. I agree with what you said. You don't have a lot of veteran guys on this D line. They did bring in Elijah Alston, who was held out of the spring game, from what I hear, due to a minor injury. So it wasn't anything serious, but you do have him as a veteran presence. So if you can add a Barron, yeah, you do really kind of solidify this defensive line with a bunch of young pups. And of course, Ruben Bain coming in for year 2. You got to be excited about this defensive line going forward, even if they don't land, you know, 2 of the aforementioned guys, you know, that I mentioned. When it comes to running back, you still do have an A.J. Allen there on the roster as far as depth is concerned. But pair Mark Fletcher, who we hope, you know, will be back fully healthy by fall, with the Damian Martinez, I think this offense is going to be really, really explosive. And also, to your point as well, every player that I talked to from this visit mentioned Cam Ward, mentioned just, you know, the ability that he has and the ability that he has to really elevate this team. So, which brings me to, you know, a point that you made earlier as well, is these expectations. Now, I think Miami's expectation at this point with all of these explosive players now is double-digit wins, right? 10 wins, I would say, is kind of reasonable, I guess you would say. But how Miami really kind of handles those expectations is really going to be, you know, the story. But in your opinion, how much do these transfers really elevate the win total in your eyes?
Well, I mean, it remains to be seen. I don't like talking about transfers. I mean, you have to, because this is, the appropriate season to do that. But we don't know what these guys look like in this Shannon Dawson and Lance Guidry, scheme. We don't know what they're going to look like in the ACC. You got guys coming from Houston, which is, a brand new Power 4 program. It's been in the AAC for years. We don't know, Oregon State. Those are different places to play. They don't run the football a lot in the Pac-12. We just don't understand how these things are going to translate. Feel pretty good about the defensive players because it's not that much different. One obviously played in the ACC, so he obviously has the ability to translate, quickly. And I'm not saying the ACC is some big giant. By all accounts, it's probably the third of the Power 4 conferences as far as rating and strength of schedule is concerned. But, that's what we're going to find out. But I think that what Miami is doing is shoring up any concerns that you possibly could have had. Now, you still need guys to develop. You still need guys to show up and do something you're not expecting. I wasn't expecting, as much as I've known Mark Fletcher. I've known Mark Fletcher since he was 10 years old. I wasn't expecting him to come in and have the kind of season that he had last year. But thank God he did, because if he doesn't, then Miami really doesn't have, a prolific run game. And their run game was very good behind a very good offensive line. And, it doesn't matter that Matt Lee got taken in the 7th and Cohen signed undrafted free agent. Those dudes did the job last year. That's why Tyler Van Dyke's up and down play was such a disappointment, because you felt like you wasted, one of the better offensive lines that we've seen at Miami in the past decade. And that kind of hurts. And you talked about Cam Ward and guys wanting to play with him and guys bringing him up. Veteran guys understand. Look, they want to be around guys with the swagoo. They want to be around guys who, have the leadership capabilities. The first things I kept hearing about Cam Ward being on campus is how he's, taking guys out to eat, how he's working, doing extra things with receivers. He's meeting with Horton and taking him up under his wing. And he's just an alpha male type leader guy. And you have Tyler Van Dyke saying in his last couple of games, maybe I didn't prepare enough. You didn't prepare enough in your senior year for a big game that could have possibly, put this team in a much better position. That's really telling. And that's when, I began to tell people, publicly, I don't think football means very much to this young man. And when you come from an affluent background, I'm not using that against him. I'm just telling you, based on how he behaved and how he played when it mattered, and some of the things he was on the record for saying, my impression as an analyst and someone who covers this team is that football was not as important to him. These guys want to be drafted. These guys right now, they want to go to the league. These guys want to win championships, and that's important. And they realize we can't just get it done during practice time. We got to put in extra work. So when you got these veteran guys wanting to jump on board, wanting to jump on ship, the NIL, for all accounts at Miami, is suitable and, above standard. So that always helps. And then you have a relentless recruiter in Mario Cristobal. And so for all the talk about Mario Cristobal and what he is as a coach, what he does well, and what you have to do in any leadership position, you have to exacerbate the things that you're absolutely good at. And he's great at recruiting. He's great at creating relationships. And they did that to the tune of 4 for 4 this weekend. And so it remains to be seen. But I am going to withhold judgment on these guys until I see them play a couple of games. And we won't know how good this class was of, transfer portal recruits until about halfway through this season. But I am not ready to give a grade. I'm not ready to jump up and down. But I still always thought that this was a CFP year or bust. I still thought that you had to take advantage. I'm going to explain why. If you don't do well in this ACC, Marcus, Florida State showed you last year, you can go out here and go 13-0, and they will keep you out. Miami has to win the majority of these games. I think they have an opportunity for a loss or two to get into this playoff. I just don't think the margin of error is very large. And so when you look at the schedule is super favorable. You get the toughest game you play all year at home. You've got some trappy games and on the road at USF and on the road at Syracuse, but you should out-talent both of those teams. And so you've got to, play some games at home. You got Georgia Tech on the road. Those are, Those 3 games are the trickiest games to me. But you got a Florida team that's fighting for its life, a coaching staff that doesn't expect to get through the season. No one's giving them any, chance to make it through the season. And so you got to go up to Florida first. You got to take care of business. And I just think when you have more talent than the other guy, you've got to win the game. And that's going to be the case in all but a few of these games. And then when you get in these 50-50 matchups or even 60-40s, you got to try to pull something off. And I think if you do that, if you're Mario Cristobal and these Hurricanes, you can get into the ACC championship, be one of those top 2 teams. It's important to play Louisville tough too. That's a difficult game also, on the road. But you're going to have to play, one of these 2 tough games at home. You're on the road at Louisville, on the road at Florida, on the road at Syracuse with a new staff and plucking guys out of the portal kind of quietly and with an SEC kind of mindset under Kirby Smart and Fran Brown as the head coach. So you're going to have to coach a few games. But I still like Miami to be expected to get to the CFP. You only have to be 1 of 12. You don't have to be the number 1. You've got to be 1 of 12. But I just think, don't be cute. Don't think you can lose 2 to 3 games and still get in. I think if you lose that second game, it's got to be in the ACC championship. I don't think you can lose 2 regular season games, not make the championship and expect to get in. And I think a 10-win season with no championship and no New Year's Six with this team might be a little bit of a disappointment, even though it's a walk, because next year, a few of these guys have eligibility past this year, but a lot of this, you basically have to do this again next year because a lot of these guys don't come back.
I think Miami fans would kill for a 10-win season at this point. I mean, if that happens, I quite frankly don't think it's a disappointment because
I disagree. I think if you win 10 wins and you don't get to the
past few years.
I think if you win 10 and you don't get to the CFP, I think guys are going to be disappointed because they're going to be in the place of, well, what if we had done this? Or what if this had happened? Or what if this broke our way? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but long term, when you look at the past couple of years, 5 wins, then 7 wins. I think if they get to 9, I think it's their floor to me. I mean, if they get to 9, it'll be a disappointment, but I think that's their range. I think the floor is like from 9 to 11 games for this team, and I think that if they fall in that range, I think it's a step in the right direction. You can continue to recruit at a high level. You still have a chance at a top 5 class again the next cycle. And I think you got to take advantage of the quarterback that you have, though, because quarterback is everything, right? Quarterback is everything when it comes to football. And last year, I mean, it's pretty safe to say that quarterback play was mediocre. And I think Ward has a chance to be above average. And when that happens, you go from, I mean, not counting that Georgia Tech game, I think that Georgia Tech game should have been a win. Of course, it counted as a loss. So you can say this team, with the play of Tyler Van Dyke last season, which, at sometimes was just absolute horrendous, you had an 8-win team, basically. And with a player like Ward, and from what you're hearing and the pieces that they've added this weekend, and I'm sure the pieces that they'll add in the future, I think this team can legitimately feel like they can get 10 wins. If they, have the ball bounce their way a little bit this season, then yeah, they could get 11, maybe get to the college football playoff, which just seems, crazy to even talk about for this team because given the last few years. But when you look at the talent and you look at the talent at quarterback, it's going to make all the difference, I think. And we'll see kind of how everything turns out. I think that first game is going to be really telling of how great this team can be, but there's really no excuses to not get a double-digit win season. And I'm saying that, just because of the talent acquisitions and the quarterback and the fact that you've got your OC and DC that are in the second year with the program, that means a lot. I mean, You got guys that are still, in the system and just, can teach the younger guys, can teach the guys that have coming in. And you've got some guys that are very familiar with their coaches as well. I mean, the linebacker from Louisville, he, was recruited by linebackers coach Derek Nicholson. The cornerback played played under Chevis Jackson and Lance Guidry at Marshall. And then you've got, Sam Brown, who also played under Shannon Dawson. So these are plug and play guys. It's not like these are guys that are going to really learn the system. They know the system. So I think that can only be an advantage for the Miami Hurricanes. And just the transfer portal altogether, Brandon, I mean, it's really just it's the way of the world as far as college football is concerned these days. I mean, this is basically free agency when it comes to, acquiring talent. And you're basically, instead of a salary cap in the NFL, it's the scholarship number. They're trying to get under that 85 number of scholarships. So I would think Miami would want to add more players here. What players do you think they still, or what positions rather, do you think they still need to add to in order to realistically get to that double-digit win number?
I think that, they're close, but like we talked about, I want to split on these Michigan State D linemen. One's obviously better than the other. You may not get the number one guy. If you do, fine. But you definitely want at least the second guy for depth purposes because he's got some snaps and you want to take advantage of that. And I think if you can go grab another defensive back, I still don't know who takes the Corey Couch spot in this defense. And remember, Couch is a guy, he didn't make a lot of noise. He didn't get drafted. To my knowledge, he hasn't signed as an undrafted free agent. But this is a guy that, he had one really stink up year. But outside of that, he was a real plug and play guy for the University of Miami. And he did so for 5 years. And so he was in this offense, in this defense, rather, playing that slot, that nickel corner role. He had a lot of picks. He led the nation in picks at one point last season before they started, really identifying, the kind of the role he was playing and scheming against it. And I think Jamel Adai really developed him into a really good, piece for this University of Miami defense. Now, will we continue to see that? Because that's what Lance Guidry was sort of handed. That was the sort of schematic that he had to play because that was his personnel and that's what they were recruiting to prior to his arrival in Coral Gables. So now the question becomes, will you see, a different scheme? And so we don't know what we're going to see. We think, we got Daryl Porter and we got the Brown brother who's now all alone by himself at Miami, but we kept the better brother. But it's a situation where, okay, now with you add this young man from Marshall, does he supplant Brown or does he go in the slot or does Brown go in the slot? So, I'll be interested to see that. So maybe one more guy in the defensive backfield, maybe a safety, maybe a corner, a guy who is sort of a hybrid who can do both. You definitely want to look at another defensive tackle. And I like, more is more. I'll take the kid from Tennessee. I liked how he rushed the passer. And it wouldn't bother me to get another outside linebacker type of guy who can rush the passer as well. I think all of the things I want to see are on defense. I think the defense is where it needs to be. I like what Lance Guidry likes to do, which is to get after the passer, put pressure on the ball, and bring it. And also, I think from the linebacker perspective, when they do go 3 down, because they don't play a 3-down linebacker set very often. But if Raul Aguayo, if Popo, he's going to be that Corey Flagg type of guy, or whoever's supposed to be flagged in that scheme, that person's got to be identified. Because, Malik Curtis is now at edge. Caleb is out. And so you sort of now have to see, okay, who's going to give us, these backgrounds. And I also think some guys have to step up. So at running back, I'm looking for Jordan Lyle to come in, Chris Wheatley Humphrey to give you more, and also CJ Chris Johnson to give you more because he has home run hitting ability. He's got to get more involved in this Lance Guidry offense. I don't know what Allen brings coming back off of injury. I wasn't at the spring game. I don't even know if he dressed or played. But, there's enough talent there to get some explosive levels.
Didn't play.
He dressed didn't play. So now, and then we haven't even mentioned Isaiah Horton, which is criminal based on the MVP spring that he had. I'm looking for him to take the next step. I'm looking for Jacoby George to stay out of trouble and be more focused and be more of a weapon for this team. Restrepo needs to continue to be Restrepo. And then I'm looking for somebody like Ray to step up, Josiah Trader, to have, a breakout freshman season. And then we haven't even talked about Nye Carr or Chance Robinson. Chance, who is still at St. Thomas Aquinas, probably in Algebra 3 right now, waiting to get on campus. But, there's a lot to like here. I don't like this 25 recruiting class yet. I'm not in love with it yet, but Miami tends to start late summer, like putting things in motion. Nickel seems to be a steal. That's great early identification from Shannon Dawson. I apologize to him. I didn't see it when they came and played Western. I thought it was a reach. I thought, man, this guy is a big reach. What is going on? How do you let this guy commit, before his junior season? And now all of a sudden he looks like a stud to me. So that's a major, major get. Not concerned about Judd. I don't think he'll ever take a snap at Miami. I think he's super developmental. I think when you go get a Reese, or even when you go grab Ja'Curry Brown back from wherever he ends up, I think he becomes, persona non grata. But, Miami is doing some positive things. But I disagree with you. I think 10 wins and no CFP is a letdown. I think it's all in. It's cash. It's pedal to the floor. I think it's CFP or bust. And you got to be thinking that way, because you don't know when the next time you're going to have a guy that's potentially a first-round quarterback. You thought you had one in Tyler Van Dyke. They were giving this guy Heisman odds. They were saying Bama wanted him, and Saban was on the phone. It was all hogwash. I wish Bama had taken him, because maybe we would have had Ja'Curry Brown, or maybe we would have had Emory, or maybe we would have had someone else, because I just don't know why we ever went back to Van Dyke after Emory played the way he played against Clemson. But, sometimes – coaches make decisions and we don't know what's going on in the background. But I count me as one who questioned that decision and still questions it to this day, because it was clear I liked Brown and especially Emory way more than Van Dyke. It was clear he just didn't have the chops. After the Texas A&M game, his best game here as it came, he just went downhill. And I don't know why that happened. And I have now moved on from it, and we wish him well in Wisconsin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a tough year, definitely a tough year. But to go from the past couple of years to the expectations of making the college football playoff, I mean, Miami's I think in a good place right now. But I hear what you're saying, that it will be a disappointment with Cam Ward, because it's his last year. And when you got a quarterback like that, you got to take advantage of it. A lot of other teams have taken advantage of quarterbacks transferring, i.e. Joe Burrow and others transferring to schools and making a college football playoff run. So it's definitely possible. We'll see if it all comes together with all the other pieces.
And can I just explain why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because outside of Georgia, who brings back their starter, LSU is going to be breaking in a new kid. Tennessee's going to be breaking in a new kid. Alabama comes in with a brand new coach, even though they bring a lot of pieces back. There are a lot of elite teams who are in transition. Auburn is one of those transitional type teams. Ole Miss brings probably the most back and the second most to be feared in the SEC, but you don't really have a lot of obvious situations here. Michigan's replacing their quarterback. Ohio State is revamping their entire roster, even though they're expected to be good. So if after UGA, Oregon, and sort of Ohio State, and maybe add Michigan and Alabama, there's a lot of room for new teams to come up. Florida State has to start over after losing all the 6 in the top 100 draft picks they have. This is not a turn the page type of situation for the Seminoles. You know what I mean? Louisville probably brings a lot back, and there's a lot to like about them, but then they're bringing in a brand new quarterback from Texas Tech. There is a lot of transition in the elite teams in college football. Drake May's no longer in Chapel Hill. So do you understand what I'm saying? This is the time. It's not so much because of what Miami is doing alone. It's because of what Miami is doing and what's going on outside of Coral Gables. There are not a lot of elite teams outside of Texas, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. There just aren't. And maybe at Oregon. So you got 6 elite teams, and they have to play each other. So some of these guys are going to, kind of move each other out of the way. And then you got a lot of people that are kind of, bumping up against the next tier. And I think that's USC, Miami. I think that's Florida State. I think that's Auburn, Ole Miss, and a handful of other schools. And so, yeah, you absolutely have to take advantage of a Cam Ward, a guy who should be, given some Heisman odds, a guy who should be, in the conversation for, the Heisman Trophy, and not only the first round draft pick status that he should, keep throughout the year. So if that's the case, yeah, I am expecting you to be able to get into one of those 12. I mean, who do you have to beat in the SEC? You only have to beat Florida State and Louisville. You only have to beat one of them. You know what I mean? Right. And so it's just, I don't know what else to say. Yeah, that's the expectation. You keep adding guys with talent. How am I going to say 10 wins is good enough? No, 10 wins is the floor. I think you say floor is 9 wins. I say the floor is 10 wins. Like disasters don't take a knee. It's 10 wins, and then, Middle Tennessee State-ish, because you're going to have that moment, it seems, every season. So I think 10 wins is your floor with this team. And I think CFB and, a high seed, maybe even a bye is the ceiling. Being one of those top 4 teams. I don't expect that they will, but I think that's where you got to be because you have the talent. And somebody has to step up. There has to be a Mark Walton. There has to be a Reuben Bain. There has to be someone you don't expect to give you a lot. And we don't know who that person is. I have a suspicion of who it might be, but, that's for a fall show. I don't want to spoil it.
I was just going to ask you, but, I guess, you'll tell me off camera what player that is. I mean, I have an idea as well, but there's plenty of a young talent that can make some noise. You mentioned JoJo as well. I loved Bobby Pruitt in the spring. They really have something with him as a freshman linebacker. Just a smart guy and just really fast and athletic. The sky's the limit for that kid and others. Jadias Richard is a player that I wanted to mention. You were talking about a guy who probably taken over for Corey Couch. I would say he's more likely going to be the guy there, I think, to play that nickel because, a nickel these days is pretty much mandatory. It's like a mandatory position, like the slot on offense. Like you pretty much always have to pencil in, I guess, the slot as a position like the nickel. So I think Jadias Richard is probably more than likely the guy to take over that spot along with Darrell Porter. And I think Damari Brown is going to be your three corners. But before I let you go, I know we're a little bit long, but the draft did happen last weekend. And Brandon, bro, I'm covering the Canes and I'm steadily watching the entire draft just to see which Hurricanes are going to come off the board. And, Cam Kitchen's going to 3rd round. I think that was pretty much kind of, people kind of probably figured 2nd, maybe at the highest in 3rd round. I think that was pretty much the place that he was going to be taken. And shout out to Cam and his career and, pleasure just kind of covering him over the years at Football Hotbed. And now with Rivals. But when you went to the 4th round, 5th round, 6th round, I was like, there's no Hurricanes being taken here. This is really unbelievable that would happen. I think, especially for a Leonard Taylor, who was projected to be a 1st round pick mid-season. And for him to not get drafted, and also Javion Cohen not to get drafted, and even the 7th round guys, you would think when it comes to the 7th round, it's almost like you don't even want to get drafted at that point because you want to pick the team that you want to go to, not a team that just kind of picks you and you have to try to kind of make the team. I think the guys who get signed after the draft who don't get drafted are probably at an advantage than the 7th round guys. So you had, you know, James Williams go 7th round, Matt Lee go 7th round, and Jaden Davis, who was a surprise. Happy for him, another hometown kid, another kid I've covered, obviously, down here in South Florida, on the Football Hotbed platform as well. To see him go was probably the best story for the Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome.
On the 3rd day, but just your general opinion, and then I'll get you out of here on, I guess, a somewhat disappointing draft for the Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah, disappointing indeed, because it would have been awesome. And I think my colleague, Brian London, the Beast, said it the best. Hey, you guys could have come back, made a ton of money for staying in college, played another year, and improved your draft stock. At the very least, Leonard Taylor, you get drafted. There's no way you don't get drafted. James and Cam, I felt like didn't run as well at the combine. So their slide is not that surprising. James was always seen as a linebacker, not a safety. And so it's a situation where he was going to go lower just because he hadn't played a lot at that position. He did himself a favor at the Senior Bowl by playing linebacker, showed his versatility. I think he's going to be a great pro. I just think because he didn't run fast, it made a lot of people have to second guess him. The draft is really, really a very delicate thing, because you have only 32 teams and there are only like 200 and something picks. You know what I mean? And so if a team doesn't have your need, and or maybe they do, and maybe they just need one guy at your position and you're like number 4 on their board, you're not going to get picked up if they get to that spot and their number 1 guy's there. And so you have to be number 1 at your position on these teams' boards. With Cam's a 1st round guy. He's had a 1st round grade for a long time. The only thing he did wrong was run a 4.65. He runs 4.4 or 4.51, 4.52. He's a 1st, 2nd round pick. Rounder. Yeah. And you talking about an All-American, a guy who had multiple interceptions per year. He's a ball hawk by common standards now in this present day and age. And so you have to understand that, I felt really safe about him. But what happened to James and what happened to LT really begs that they come back. Cohen and obviously Matt Lee didn't have, and Davis didn't have any more eligibility. But, man, wouldn't you like to see them on this team? And I never understood LT being such a highly, sought after guy and talked about guy. We cover every game. He had games here and there, but he never dominated. He just didn't. And I didn't expect him to be that big of a draft deal. And it turns out I was right. I kept it to myself because you don't want to appear to be a hater, but I was thinking to myself, what has he done in college to make everybody just think that he's this teaming, pick? And that's where some of the hyperbole of, media coverage and, people who are just not really on the inside of football, who haven't been consulted, can kind of get somebody thinking that they're better than they are. And I think that he was given really bad advice, and he would much prefer to come back to University of Miami than to be an undrafted free agent. He could have made $1 million almost on this team. If not, he would have made quite a bit of money, at least $500,000 to stay in college and lock down that defensive line next to Mesidor and Bain, and let's go to work. What are you doing? You're not even drafted, young man. Like, we got NIL. Stay put.
Yeah, definitely. Leonard Taylor, obviously another player covered in high school through the Football Hotbed platform. So disappointing to kind of see, his career end, at the University of Miami the way it did, undrafted. Last year, I agree with you, didn't really flash. 2022 he did. 2022 he did. He had some plays. He had an interception. Really showed up in that Texas A&M game, but last season.
So go after that year. Don't come back and have a mediocre year and get undrafted.
Right. Exactly. So disappointed to see that happen, but wishing him all the best with the New York Jets. I believe he signed as an undrafted free agent. Brandon Odoi from footballhotbed.com. Thank you once again for joining me. Great stuff from you as always. Make sure you check out footballhotbed.com. Produced a great reporter like myself, I mean, it's basically a place where you can, start your career and really it can take off to
Yeah,
the next
we need
level.
another Marcus Benjamin, man. We've been lacking ever since. All my guys get promoted. That's the problem. I tell people, all
Yeah,
my guys, boss up, and you're the next version of that. So shout out to you, and you always be a part of Hotbed World and the family. You know that, and it's been great to be on with you today.
absolutely. Thanks again. Make sure you subscribe to canescounty.com for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Also, subscribe to this podcast, the Storm Tracker Podcast, on all platforms. Until the next episode.